Hello and welcome to another edition of For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy. My guest today is a legend, I think anyway. His name's Barry ZeVan. He is known as the Peekaboo Weatherman. Perhaps you remember him from that. He's an actor, voiceover, and radio performer, so that's why I love him. World traveler and author. The new book, My Life Among Giants, a memoir. First time on the show, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, you said to me off the air that this book is so packed with stories and celebrities that if it was going to be a movie, it would be like a week's worth of movies, really, right?
It'd be a 17-hour movie.
And as it is, anytime they make a movie out of a book, they always have to cut things anyway, so you can imagine what would get cut out of this. Before we get into all your stories, was it just because of your life and experiences that you said, you know what, I have to put this down, I have to jot it down, I have to make a book out of it?
Well, a lot of people had said that to me, but Jerry Stiller, who has been a friend forever.
We're big fans, too.
Well, he's wonderful, and so I got to know him and Ann briefly back in the 1950s when they were doing the Sullivan Show, and I was doing national television. I was on Mr. Peepers for 2 years, well, like Wally Cox and Tony Randall, as one of the students, and also on the Perry Como Show for 2 years, singing with the Ray Charles Singers. But anyway, Jerry and I reconnected in the early 1980s, and for whatever reason, he took me under his wing. And so
where were you at that point?
Minneapolis,
Okay.
Minnesota, yeah, where I still am, except I'm here, so I'm not really in Minneapolis.
You will be, though, eventually again. Yeah.
In a couple days.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Jerry, about 2 years ago, he said, Barry, people have to know your life story. He said, there's none other like it. And I felt almost, humbly embarrassed that, well, yeah, everybody has a story. He said, yeah, but not like you. And he said, it has touched every base that every human being could have with all these people who have actually led the world and have been icons, from politicians to show business to broadcasting. And he said, your stories are incredible, and it's all in here. He said, so start writing that book. And he kept pounding on me. So God bless him, he pounded enough where I asked him, I said, well, can I actually entitle the book, Thank You, Jerry Stiller, for urging me to write this book? And he said, sure, and I have it in writing. But anyway, somebody said, well, if it's Thank You, Jerry Stiller, for urging me to write this book, you have to have your name on the book. So at the very top of the book, as you can see, it says, Thank You, Jerry Stiller, for urging me to write this book. And then the story, Barry ZeVan, My Life Among the Giants. But it's also fraught with, on the back cover, some of those who endorsed it are Vice President Mondale, former Vice President Mondale, Sam Donaldson, who's a dear friend, who's actually hosted 3 documentaries I've produced, and then Rudy Maxa, who is a PBS travel star. He's had his shows on PBS for a long time. Rudy said what people need to know is that being a celebrity is fraught with dark sides and good sides. It's not all wonderful and great. And for you, he said, I want to put on the back of the book, which I think he did. He said, read this book, you'll find out the price of celebrity. So ups and downs.
It's one thing to live your life the way you did, have all these stories, but when you decide to sit down and put pen to paper, what is the process like? How do you start even? Someone can say, write a book. Okay, great, I have all these stories, but how do you get started?
Good question. Chronologically, for me, I have an eidetic memory.
Wow.
And I literally remember almost everything. And it made such an impression on me, I just decided to start from the very beginning. And in the book, I think I say, let's start at the very beginning, as they say in The Sound of Music. So that's how I did it. And I was kind of born into the business. My second cousin, Cecil Brown, was ABC's first anchorman for, I think, less than 6 months or fewer than 6 months. But he was one of Edward R. Murrow's boys in London. And his mother and my maternal grandmother were sisters. And my mom grew up with Cecil. So when we had moved to New York City from Pittsburgh, we spent a lot of time with him when he was with WABC and ABC. And yeah, Edward R. Murrow picked him up because Cecil had been torpedoed by a Japanese ship 10 days after World War II in the South China Sea. And he clung to some pieces of the boat. He wrote a book called Suez to Singapore, which became actually a journalistic icon in books for students of history.
I want to talk TV for a second because the iconic nature of the fact that you performed on the very first radio TV station actually that existed in Pittsburgh. Talk about that.
No, it's first radio station.
Oh, it was radio. Okay.
Yeah, KDKA Radio was the world's first commercial radio station, and I started as a boy singer at age 5.5.
Your career was that young. You started.
Yeah,
Wow.
February 20th, 1943. So I've been in the business 73 years, and I did. In 1946, I was asked, because I was on a CBS radio show called Give and Take, as a contestant, and it was a quiz show. And at the end,
you have an eidetic memory, by the way. So
yes. So the producer came to my mother and said, "We would love to have your son on television." We didn't know what television was. This is 1946, 2 years before the entire United States got television. It was the first regularly scheduled show. It was called King's Party Line. We did it in the New York General Building, which is that tall building at the south end of Park Avenue, right in front of Grand Central Station, and where they still do some CBS soaps. So anyway, went on, and Bill Cullen was the announcer. And Bill, ironically, was from my hometown, Pittsburgh. There's some Bill Cullen stories in there, too.
Back to politics for a second, because it wasn't just the reporters and the media that you worked with and were yourself, but you interviewed presidents, like President Truman, for example.
That was the highlight of the interview part of the career. That happened because I had done some shirt-tail speech doctoring for Senator Frank Church in Idaho, and Truman was coming through, stomping through Idaho to help Church get reelected. And I said, "Frank, do you think I could get an interview?" He said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." Well, myself and 2 others were in a room, and we did a private interview with Truman, and there's still the audio tape.
Did they feed you the questions, or was it just
no.
all on your?
No.
So you got to ask whatever you wanted.
Well, Mr. Truman, I mean, he, after all those years, this was in 1963, and so he kind of had in his head what he wanted to tell us. But the stories were profound. I mean, the first one was how he did not want to become vice president. And then when President Roosevelt asked him, he had to say yes. And then the day that Roosevelt died, this is in great detail in the book, the day Roosevelt died, how that all came about to his knowledge. And then about the atomic bomb, he knew nothing about the Manhattan Project. And the next day after
and he's
Roosevelt,
the president? Wow, yeah.
after the Roosevelt died, they had a cabinet meeting, and Secretary of War Henry Stimson said, "Mr. President, there's something about which you don't know," and President Roosevelt didn't tell you. He said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "It's called the Manhattan Project, and it's the development of the atomic bomb." And he said, "What's the atomic bomb?"
Wow.
And so then he was angry. He said he literally had such mixed emotions because he was angry that the president thought he was too stupid. In fact, Stimson said President Roosevelt didn't think you could handle the information. And then of course he was sad because Roosevelt had died.
But why did he ask him to be his VP if he didn't think he was right for the job?
Because the wisdom at that time was Roosevelt didn't want anybody who could overshadow his popularity.
Okay.
And Truman was considered then the dumbest of the senators. And isn't that sad?
Wow.
Because he turned out to be one of the best presidents we ever had. And so, and then the final story he told was about how the day he fired MacArthur on Wake Island. And it's all in the book. But to hear him tell you this face to face, I mean, we were this far away.
Yeah.
It's like a history book talking to you. This book itself, not to beat my own drum, but
No.
it's kind of the history of broadcasting and how things evolved, and with people I got to know. Art Linkletter was a great friend, and there's a fun story about Linkletter and Walt Disney. Walt Disney was broke before he opened Disneyland, and so I will offer, if I may, the story of this.
Right. Let's take a break. I want you to hold that thought, and you will, because you have an eidetic memory. So let's take a break and come right back. Barry ZeVan, the man. This is My Life Among the Giants, a memoir. It's jam-packed with stories like this. We're going to take a short break and come right back. I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Stay right there. Welcome back to For the Record. I'm Sean Murphy, the legendary Barry ZeVan. I had wanted to make sure I pronounced that right because he goes, "What was your analogy, ZeVan?"
Oh, my mother used to say, if you miss the bus, take ZeVan. So that's
This book, My Life Among the Giants, a memoir, so many great stories about pop culture and celebrities and politics, etc. Let's give the website out for people to go and learn more if they want to get the book. What is the website?
okay. It's of course www.barryzevan.com, BARRYZEVAN.com, or Amazon.com.
What else is on the website for people to go and see?
That's all.
Okay, so
all
go get
about
this
the book.
The book.
That's right.
When we went into the break, we were talking a great story about Disney, so let's continue that.
Yeah, Art Linkletter, as I had mentioned,
Another legend, by the way.
yeah, we were friends for a long time, and there's huge stories about Art in there, and our times together. But he told me once, he said, what really made me so financially independent was Walt Disney being broke. And I said, what? He said, yeah, Disney called me up just prior to the opening of Disneyland. He said, Art, I want you to MC the opening, but I'm broke. I really am broke. I can't pay you. So you figure a way to be remunerated, and I'll agree to it. So Art called him back in a couple hours, and he said, well, Walt, I know you're going to sell a lot of film at that place. Why don't you just give me 10% of the retail sales price of every roll of film that you sell in perpetuity, and we'll call it even. Disney said yes. Art then, with that money, bought 4,000 acres of tomatoes in Oceanside, California, and he knew the president of Hunt's Ketchup, so Hunt's Ketchup uses exclusively Art Linkletter's tomatoes for their ketchup. Of course, they have other tomatoes they use, but his are always used, and Lois, his widow, who is now in her 90s, is still collecting the money from the tomatoes. Of course, film went out of business.
Right.
But
Now, did Walt Disney not think that it would be as successful as it was to agree to that, or did Art Linkletter know, or was it a leap of faith on his part to think you're going to sell, really going to sell tons of film?
I think it was Art being smart.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Having a vision for the future.
that's
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Of course, he didn't get the film out of Disney World, though, but it's just out of Disneyland. That was enough.
Yeah.
With 1 million visitors a month.
Yeah, imagine if he was on both coasts with it. That'd
Oh,
be
my goodness.
unbelievable. Now, before we run out of time today, I want to talk about the weatherman portion of your career, okay? Especially, Peekaboo Weatherman. How did that come about? Tell me about that.
Okay, I got my weather training in the U.S. Air Force. Thank you, U.S. Air Force. And so I never thought it would help me on the outside because I had started as a broadcaster. So the first television station at which I was in Missoula, Montana. And when I started, we weren't doing a local newscast. Well, CBS at the time had Douglas Edwards doing the CBS Evening News for 15 minutes, but they wanted the affiliates to do 15 minutes to fill out the half hour. So the boss said, do you know anything about the weather? And I was only an announcer and director switcher. And I said, yes, here's my certificate. So
Were you a meteorologist? Or?
Yeah, I was a meteorological, I can't pronounce it. I am one, but I can't pronounce it. No, a meteorological technician in the Met Tech is what they used to call us. We used to do the dirty work for the forecasters. So anyway, I was facing the weather board. He said, do it any way you want to do it. So
They were desperate. Huh?
Yeah, so I'm facing the weather board, and I thought, this is rude. You're supposed to look at your audience. So the camera was pedestal downward a little bit, and I started turning around and went like this to the camera, and I go, let's see this. Oh, yeah, keeping eye contact with the audience. And that was it, and I heard our newscaster across the studio laughing, and I thought, oh, brother.
Did they have green screens at that point? Or?
Oh, gosh, no.
No, that was way
with
too.
With a blackboard.
Blackboard, okay.
A blackboard with white chalk, and so with an outline of the United States. So anyway, the boss called right after. He said, you keep peeking around at that camera. He said, you'll make a lot of money. He said, that'll be your meal ticket for as long as you want.
And it was just sort of by accident, but you knew that, you didn't like the fact that the weather people weren't looking at their audience, right?
Yeah, well, it's just rude. I mean, you're supposed to look at your audience.
So that's where the peekaboo part comes in,
That's right. I kept
Yeah.
peeking around at the camera, yeah.
Wow. I like to watch a lot of documentaries on TV, and I'm fascinated by certain individuals, and one of them was Howard Hughes. I was just glued to his life and his story because it was so all over the place, and you have a connection there, don't
I
you?
worked for him.
Yeah.
Worked for him for 2 years. Of course, I never met him, but after I left his employ, I found out he was a big fan of mine.
Really?
And there's some incredible stories about Howard Hughes in the book. Mr. Hughes was wonderful. One thing I can say, I mean, without going into all the stories, I contracted valley fever when I was working for Mr. Hughes in Las Vegas, and it's 97% fatal. So I was in the hospital at Sunrise Hospital there for a month. And when I went to pay the bill, thank goodness, there's a huge story about how I survived. But anyway, when I went to pay the bill, they said, "Oh no, Mr. Hughes has taken care of everything."
So it's sort of like having health insurance with his company back then, right?
Well, we had health insurance, but he took care of the entire bill.
Wow.
Personally.
Wow.
And then I found out in later years, or not in later years even, later months after I quit to go to the ABC station for more money and more stars coming on my show, that he was worried that I was changing my style one night, and he had one of his aides call me. It's a very long story, but bottom line was he was a fan. He was a fan.
And you never met him?
No.
Wow.
Nobody ever met him.
Well, yeah.
We used to feel sorry for him because all the drapes were always closed on the 9th floor of the Desert Inn. But in later years, when I was doing my Hollywood interview show, we got to do the interviews in that suite, the entire 9th floor. We didn't have to feel sorry for Howard. It was all white marble, Persian rug tapestries. I mean, it was...
Unfortunately, his mental condition was,
Yeah, but that film, though, The Aviator, nailed it right away.
Is that right? Yeah?
Oh, DiCaprio, right down to the voice.
Now, because in his early years, he was a little bit more social, at least, than he was in his latter, in his recluse years, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
But, oh, what a wonderful man.
Another famous individual that you may have heard of, Elvis, the King, Presley. Okay, this guy knows him too. Yeah.
Well, I had my one wonderful evening with Elvis at the Aladdin Hotel the night after he and Priscilla were married, and the story's in the book. But he was the sweetest man you could ever want to encounter. Just so nice and humble, and not pretend humble. I mean, I'm talking really gentle, kind. God bless him.
And because you know how many big stars, it goes to their head, they become, some celebrities have their nose in the air. Elvis, the King, did not.
No, but Priscilla
She
was angry at him that night.
Is that right?
And the story is in the book. I'm sorry to keep saying that.
No, that's okay.
But yeah.
How do you, when you write a book like this and it's full of these celebrity stories and you do interviews because you want to promote the book, but how do you do it with just enough info to tickle their taste buds, but not give away anything in the book? How do you do that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, because this is a kind of a new thing for me, and I want to tell every story that's in there. As I say, it'd be a 17-hour show. You'd even go for weeks and weeks.
Yeah. It'd have to be a mini series for
It's
sure.
very, very difficult. All I can say is it's very unpredictable. If people will see the cover and see me with all these wonderful people who became my friends, Sammy Davis Jr. and Shirley Jones and everybody else, Colin Powell, Henry Kissinger.
It's such a vast range, politicians, celebrities, actors, athletes. There's a section about wrestling, and me and the director were fans of wrestling. Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, well, I thanks to Vern Gagne for the American Wrestling Association, he had me, because he knew I had great relationships with a lot of the stars, had me do star interviews and had them to be on his wrestling show. And so Sharo, God bless her, was the one who went crazy with us. She gave us an hour. She just talked on for an hour about her life with Xavier Cugat and with just her life, period. And there were others, Raul Julia, who now sadly is dead, but there were several others. Yeah, Alan King.
Oh, so many, As I don't get a chance to ask this very often because I don't have usually a fellow broadcaster on. Usually it's an author, a celebrity, or somebody, a wrestler. We had Bob Backlund on not too long ago. Your opinion of the broadcasting industry in general these days. Obviously, it's a lot different than when you started out. And I get the feeling that you might not be a fan of the newer stuff now.
I'm not. I mean, I think we're almost over-informed, and nothing's special anymore. When the days of, and Chet Huntley was a good friend of mine too, when the days of the Huntley-Brinkley Report, dear Sam Donaldson, my friend, when he was in 2020, even as an anchor, there was some dignity, quality. Peter Jennings and I were very close. And it's just, it hurts only because the young people today aren't getting the deeper stories. It's all sound bites, and in my opinion, and they're probably saying, "Oh, you old fogey," but it's the truth. And if they only knew about the dignity of it, even when Dan Rather was anchoring the CBS Evening News, or of course Walter Cronkite, my cousin's friend, but to me, no, there's got to be a way for it to be a little deeper, in my opinion.
Your opinion of the 24-hour news channels, because that's probably one of the reasons you're getting these quick sound bites, because the turnaround is so fast.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be the first to get to the news, and sometimes at the cost of actually verifying its validity.
You're correct. I got to know Ted Turner a little bit. Jane Fonda even more. She dated my best friend in high school for several years, 5 years. But anyway, CNN to me, not to give a commercial, but CNN to me is the best because they do elongate stories, and they now, Mr. Zucker is now in charge, but I think since he came aboard, it's fewer headlines and more, okay, this is some great meat, and they do go deeper into it. That's just my own personal feel.
How about the apparent demise of the newspaper industry? It seems like that's a tough, sore subject for you.
I hate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did some blogging for the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and I wrote for the Detroit Free Press in my life, and to hold a real newspaper in your hand. And I hear it's really refreshing, though. I've heard today, and you probably have too, stories that young people yearn to actually hold a real book, a real newspaper, a real piece of paper in their hands, and read it.
Taking a break from the iPad.
Oh, and what a shame. So I hope the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune and the New London paper or whatever, they all do survive, because there's a difference. And if it could be instilled into young people's heads that here's why it's different, guess what? You can go back and read this again, and you can hold on to it. It's something that's not electronic, and God forbid, as you and I were talking during the break, if it was an apocalypse, you'd have nothing to hold.
Nothing would work.
It'd be a blank screen.
Yeah.
Hello.
You're right. Speaking of young people, what are your thoughts on social media? Because that's where a lot of them are getting their news. That is their playground these days.
Well, I mean, to me, I'll be 79 in August 5th, and
do you have to embrace it?
I think you have to. You don't have to as much as people think you have to.
You don't have to live on it. Yeah.
No. I use it as a resource. I'm happy for the networking, especially, thank God, about the book, but I don't go that much to social media. No, I really don't.
You do embrace technology a little bit, because I saw you with your iPhone out in the lobby a little while ago too.
Yes.
You may not be familiar with all the apps on it, but you accept that is part of life these days, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It really is, and I mean, it's a transition. I mean, it really, really is from the days. I always say, I wish it was still 1945.
Yeah.
Or 1935.
Something else different, and you just happened to write a book recently. Nowadays, people can kind of self-publish if they want to. So really, anybody can put out a book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And
is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think it's wonderful. Yeah. And I got this book published through a publisher, but it was...
That's the regular, that's the traditional way, right?
Yeah, but it's kind of self-published.
Okay.
I mean, it is and isn't. I'm still in a clear...
There's about 1 billion more stories in this book that we did not get to in the course of this half-hour interview. So you have to get this book. Everything from pop culture and celebrities, politics, wrestling, being a weatherman, a broadcaster. And I respect you greatly for all the years, because I also do a radio show in the morning and do this TV show, and you've done it all too, a lot more than I have. So I really thank you for being on the show, and I recommend everybody get this book. So
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Barry ZeVan, the book, My Life Among the Giants, a memoir. One more time on the website for people to go and get it.
BarryZeVan.com or Amazon.com. BarryZeVan.com will get you to the ordering site faster. And thanks again to Jerry Stiller for.
Yeah, absolutely. We love him. Big fan. We're a big fan of Seinfeld. That's the later career that he had, obviously, but
Right.
but we still love him. That's our show for today. You can see this show and many others on our YouTube site. Until next time, I'm Sean Murphy. This is For the Record. Take care.